The gold and silver pawn shop has survived bankruptcy, family lawsuits, felony charges, and even the death of the old man himself. For 15 years, it was the most watched pawn shop on earth. But in 2026, fans began noticing something strange. Construction equipment started appearing outside. Barriers lined Las Vegas Boulevard. Corey left the country, and reports claimed his net worth had fallen from $4 million to just $10,000. Rick's own mother filed a lawsuit against him over missing money, and the show that once pulled in 7 million viewers per episode suddenly went quiet. So when rumors spread that the shop was being torn down, people believed it. But the truth is far more complicated than anyone expected. To understand what's really happening in 2026, you have to go all the way back to where it began. And that story doesn't start under the bright lights of Las Vegas. It starts in Danville, Virginia. Richard Benjamin Harrison Jr. was born on March 4, 1941, and grew up in Lexington, North Carolina at 115 Peacock Avenue. From the beginning, his life had a rough edge. He dropped out of high school in his junior year, and by the age of 14, he was already driving a school bus. At 17, he met Joanne Rue at a barn dance, a moment that would change everything. Joanne's father was a county judge, and not long after, Richard found himself in serious trouble for stealing a car. The judge gave him a life-altering choice, prison or the military. In October 1958, Richard chose the United States Navy, a decision that would shape the rest of his life. He served for 20 years, rising to the rank of personnelman first class. During his time in the Navy, he served on 4 ships, including the fleet tug USS Chawanak, and completed multiple deployments to the Western Pacific during the Vietnam era. Somewhere along the way, even though he was only 38, he earned the nickname the Old Man. It suited him so well that it stayed with him for the rest of his life. Back home, Richard and Joanne built a family together. They had 4 children, Sherry, Joseph, Rick, and Chris. But their happiness was never without hardship. Sherry was born with Down syndrome and passed away at just 6 years old. Her medical care was costly, and after leaving the service, Richard re-enlisted just 14 months later to ensure she could remain covered by military health care. That tells you a lot about the kind of man he was. Tough, stubborn, and proud. But when it came to his family, he carried the burden himself. When he was discharged in 1979, Richard transitioned into civilian life and began working part-time at Joanne's real estate office in San Diego. Joanne had earned her license in 1970 and built a successful business, and for a while, things seemed stable. Then everything changed. In 1981, interest rates skyrocketed to 18%, and almost overnight, the family lost around $1 million. What they had built collapsed quickly, leaving them with just $5,000. With no other choice, the Harrisons packed up their lives, got in the car, and drove to Las Vegas. That decision changed everything. Richard and his son Rick, who was just 16 at the time, opened a small gold and silver coin shop in a cramped 300-square-foot storefront on Las Vegas Boulevard. They sold coins, bought second-hand goods, and slowly learned how the city really worked. Las Vegas was a place full of people chasing luck, running out of money, and hoping their next move would turn everything around. And the Harrisons were right there in the middle of it. The shop slowly began to grow. By 1986, it had expanded enough to move into a larger location on Fremont Street. But even then, stability didn't last long. Just 2 years later, they lost that lease as well. That setback could have ended everything, but Rick had been paying attention. He shared his father's stubbornness, even if he lacked the same military discipline. Instead, he focused on understanding the system, especially the unusual legal rules surrounding pawn licenses in Las Vegas. A city law from 1955 limited the number of pawn licenses based on population. There could only be 1 license for every 50,000 residents. Rick became obsessed. Week after week, he called the city statistician, asking the same question over and over. Had the population crossed 250,000 yet? Was a new license finally available? Then one day, it happened. The moment the number hit, the Harrisons acted fast. In 1989, they secured their pawn license and opened the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop on Las Vegas Boulevard South, less than 2 miles from the Strip. That address would later become famous, but at the time it was just another small family business trying to survive. For the next 20 years, the shop stayed mostly out of the spotlight. It operated 24 hours a day, lending money to gamblers who needed just enough cash to get home, and buying whatever people brought through the door. By 2005, the business was loaning out around $3 million a year and earning roughly $700,000 in interest. Rick also developed a sharp eye for unusual items. He was drawn to objects with a story, rare coins, historical artifacts, and sports memorabilia with strange or unexpected histories. That curiosity gave the shop its identity. It wasn't just a place to pawn jewelry or tools. It became a place where rare and fascinating pieces passed through. Slowly, people started to notice. The shop appeared in a PBS documentary in 2001, and later in an episode of Insomniac with Dave Attell in 2003. Around that time, Rick began pitching the idea of a television show based on the shop. He believed there was something unique there, but no one else seemed convinced. One deal with HBO came close, but they wanted a darker concept, focusing more on the strange characters visiting the shop late at night. Rick turned it down. For a while, the idea stalled. Then, in 2008, everything changed. Two producers from Manhattan, Brent Montgomery and Colby Gaines, visited Las Vegas on a weekend trip. They ran a small company called Left Field Pictures and were searching for a family-run pawn shop that could anchor a reality series. They found gold and silver. From there, the pitch went to the History Channel, and the timing couldn't have been better. The network's president, Nancy Dubuque, was trying to shift the channel away from non-stop military programming and toward content that could reach a wider audience. According to the story the shop still tells, the pitch meeting nearly fell apart when the DVD player broke. They had to borrow one from a nearby office. Once it played, the decision was immediate. The show was approved on the spot. Even then, it was still evolving. The original working title was Pawning History, which made sense, but lacked impact. Then someone at Left Field came up with Pawn Stars, a bold, attention-grabbing name that stuck. The format also changed. Experts were brought in on camera to evaluate items and explain their history, giving the show an educational edge that aligned perfectly with the History Channel's brand. On July 19, 2009, the first two episodes aired back-to-back, Boom or Bust and Confederate Conundrum. Almost instantly, the show took off. Within 10 weeks, Pawn Stars became the highest-rated program on the History Channel. Within 18 months, it was the most successful series in the network's history. The numbers were massive. On January 24, 2011, one episode drew over 7 million viewers, making it the most-watched telecast the channel had ever seen. That same year, the show averaged more than 7.5 million viewers per episode, ranking it among the top reality shows on television. What started as a struggling family business had turned into a global phenomenon. By the early 2010s, Pawn Stars had become a television powerhouse. It wasn't just popular, it was dominating. At its peak, it ranked as the second most-watched reality series on television, trailing only Jersey Shore. Week after week, whether airing on Mondays or later Thursdays, it consistently topped cable ratings between 2010 and 2013. And the success didn't stay on screen, it spread everywhere. Rick Harrison released his autobiography, License to Pawn, in 2011, and it climbed onto the New York Times bestseller list. The city of Las Vegas honored the cast with the key to the city, and Clark County even declared an official Pawn Stars Day. What started as a single show quickly turned into a full franchise. Spin-offs followed, including American Restoration, Counting Cars, and later Pawn Stars Do America. By the time the original series crossed 600 episodes, it was airing in over 150 countries and dubbed into nearly 40 languages. And as the show exploded, so did the shop itself. Before television, the gold and silver pawn shop saw around 70 to 100 customers a day. Just 10 weeks after the show premiered, that number jumped to 700. Within a year, it crossed 1,000 daily visitors. By 2012, it was pulling in anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 people every single day. Rick had no choice but to adapt. He invested $400,000 to expand the showroom, eventually growing it to 15,000 square feet. It was the 10th expansion the business had undergone. He also hired nearly 30 additional employees just to keep up with demand. The area around the shop began transforming too. Around 2015, Rick launched Pawn Plaza next door, a 2-story retail complex built from shipping containers. It introduced new attractions like a barbecue restaurant and a candy shop, turning the location into a full tourist destination rather than just a pawn business. At that point, the gold and silver pawn shop wasn't just a store, it had become one of the biggest non-gaming attractions in Las Vegas. But what viewers saw on television wasn't always the full picture. The show created the illusion that rare and valuable items simply walked in off the street, leading to spontaneous negotiations. In reality, the process was far more controlled. Items were first screened by employees, then reviewed by producers, who decided whether they were interesting enough for television. Sellers were often asked to return on filming days and were coached on how to act on camera. Even the negotiations weren't always as real as they seemed. Producers sometimes prearranged deals to ensure transactions would actually happen on screen. The items were real, but the drama was often shaped. The arguments, the humor, the personalities, even the awkward moments, were all amplified for entertainment. At times, sound effects were even added to make interactions feel more intense than they actually were. It worked because it felt real. But in truth, viewers weren't just watching a family. They were watching a version of that family, carefully shaped for television. Even so, the risks of the business were very real. The cast had been burned more than once. The old man once lost nearly $30,000 after mistaking cubic zirconia for real diamonds. Corey, at just 18, accidentally bought 6 fake Rolex watches in a single week, costing the shop around $4,000. Rick himself lost $40,000 on diamond earrings tied to credit card fraud. In this business, even experts get fooled. Still, over time, those risks turned into massive rewards. Rick Harrison's net worth has been estimated between $9 and $10 million, driven by his ownership stake in the shop, television income, real estate, merchandise, and licensing deals. Chumley, who started as a teenage employee, also built significant wealth, reportedly around $5 million. He even opened his own candy store at Pawn Plaza, capitalizing on the wave of tourists the show created. The shop itself reportedly brings in over $5 million a year from pawn operations alone. When combined with television, merchandise, and licensing, the broader Pawn Stars empire has been estimated to generate tens of millions annually. But despite all the success, the family couldn't escape loss. On June 25, 2018, Richard the Old Man Harrison passed away at the age of 77 after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. Few people outside his inner circle knew how serious his condition had become. When the news broke, it hit hard. Rick shared a message saying he had lost a father, a teacher, and a friend. The History Channel aired a tribute special honoring his legacy, showcasing the sharp deals, quiet humor, and wisdom that defined him. But even in death, complications followed. His will, updated in 2017, revealed a surprising decision. His youngest son, Christopher, was intentionally excluded from the estate. No explanation was given, and the move raised questions the family chose not to answer publicly. Then, in 2022, tensions escalated further. Rick's mother, Joanne, filed a lawsuit against him, accusing him of manipulating ownership of the business years earlier and mismanaging funds tied to the estate. She also claimed that significant amounts of cash and silver were unaccounted for. Rick denied the allegations, calling it a private matter, but the damage was already done. For a business built on family, the cracks were starting to show, and by 2026, with rumors swirling, construction surrounding the shop, and the show falling silent, people began to wonder, was this the end of the gold and silver pawn shop, or just another chapter in its long, complicated story?